brought up the mantras. I think that's really fascinating. What do the mantras do, and why is it so important to be saying them? What do they mean? What kind of effect do they have when expressed?
Well, there's a lot of different mantras. I mean, in Vedic meditation, we think one which is called a bija mantra. So it's a seed mantra, and it's just a very innocent sound. It has no meaning to it. We think it really gently, and our mind is charmed by it, but we don't say it out loud. We just think it, okay, and it helps the mind to rest. You can sing that, you can chant the Gayatri mantra. I mean, there's probably, God knows how many versions of Gayatri mantra on Spotify, right? I think Devi Pramal's. And then when you're in Rishikesh and you do certain ceremonies and yagyas, there are certain mantras that we would say that invoke certain aspects of nature to enhance what we may wish to receive, okay? And so it's repetition around essentially what we would consider to be the dynamics that sound play in nature that we can replicate to then awaken those things that are going on inside our natural experience. So Om Shivaya, Om Shivaya Nama Om, and you would just repeat it and repeat it. If anyone's done yoga in India listening to this, I know what I'm talking about, because you repeat it for a long time.
Yeah.
And your knees are sore, and you're sitting by the bank of the Ganges thinking, oh, this is discipline. But in answer to your question, I would not say that I wouldn't profess to know as much as a pundit by the banks of the Ganges. I've certainly participated in a lot of those types of things in India. And it's just to say that we can, I guess there's a devotional component, or even one of discipline, that says through invoking those sounds, we can garnish support for a life that we may wish to lead. Because they say Om is the universal sound.
Yes.
And there's a sound that that ultimately, when creation, like at the moment of creation, there's the fundamental underlying sound, and there's a whole lot of things that go on with that. And then there's a sound called ritam, which we talk about. Regular meditators will start to say that they can hear a little ringing in their sound. They don't have jitness. They actually just are hearing the moment where the absolute moves into the relative. I'm just playing around with some concepts here, but there's a thing called ritam, which so there's different sounds that exist in nature. Now, if you think about it, front row conscious cinema, you're in a very basic awake state. Your senses are dulled, okay? So sugar, you hear, the idea that in actual fact, if you're front row conscious cinema, all you're going to do is gossip, right? And all you're going to do is listen and watch, repetitive, not very inspiring things on Netflix, and you'll be walking back up the fridge and you're sitting there. So you think about your whole experience is probably completely external, and that's all that's interesting to you, all right? Come back conscious, but you're coming back, you're becoming more conscious. Things are starting to change. What do I see? What do I choose to be charmed by that I look at? Well, it's not going to be the completely mindless destruction on whatever it is. What do I choose to hear? You're not going to sit around a table and gossip about anyone. No interest, completely uncharming, and in fact, you become quite opposed to it.
Isn't it funny where you start noticing when everyone else does it, or when people do, and it's so off-putting? It's my number one thing where I think, that's cruel or mean, or why do you choose to talk like that? It's, let's talk about something else.
Well, that's just it, because it's really only, and also once we're there, if we're gossiping, we're really just commenting. We're running commentary on things about ourselves that are actually being triggered by other people's behaviour. It goes on and on, because it's all separation. So I said that person's that, but in actual fact, these three things are pointing back at you. There's all that stuff. But if we can level that aside, the move away from those things, the expansion of a conscious experience means that everything that we start to see, taste, touch, smell, feel, everything that will be really reflective of our conscious state. It will be charming. It will be high grade. It will be, wow, this documentary is incredible. When, of course, 6 months before you were just, walking dead for a week straight. Okay. All of a sudden it's like, oh, well, sugar. Oh, geez, it's strong, because your nervous system's turning around going, don't need that anymore. And then this becomes the challenging part to this, is like all of a sudden you will start to think that you don't want to go and have that lunch with
Yes.
Those people.
It does.
And that's
hard.
change. It's change.
But it like I often talk about this with friends, and I've mentioned it a lot of times on the podcast, where people message or email me and they say, I've come into this sort of work, I'm meditating, I'm really becoming very aware of my surroundings, but now I realize I don't like my husband or my friends, and I realize that what do I do? And you see, like, they'll change jobs and they might get divorced or their friends start changing, but at the same time, allowing that to happen and being okay with it. Because I think a lot of the time when we are shifting, we're still holding on to the known, because the known is that safe. It's safe. Even if it's not comfortable, it's still safe. It's familiar. So it's about evolving, and during that process, letting go of those things that no longer serve you.
That's exactly it. Now, the more that we're meditating, the more foundation and trust we're building, in which case this individual expression of ourselves is actually getting this lovely big base on it. And so it has capacity to lean in discomfort. It's very natural. If you're leaning in discomfort and you've got no base, you fall over. You won't do it. It's ultimately too scary. If you've got a much broader foundation and there's that broad conscious experience, you're now starting to know that you're not just this eyes open relative experience, but you're a much broader experience. You'll start to kind of test out those areas of discomfort, and you're like, oh, I can move in this direction, and it's all okay.
Yeah.
Because your physiology is processing a lot of the discomfort, which is stress and all those types of things. You're not as tired, you're less fatigued, you've got more energy to try new things out. You've got more capacity to hold with discomfort, which is where, if you do start moving and changing, the resistance from other people, family, friends, all that sort of stuff, that can build to a crescendo.
It does.
But if you're it does.
It does.
And
it always does.
It does. And it can be a really challenging time. But fundamentally, if we think about, change is the only thing taking place, evolution is the only directive, that it's really just saying the only thing going on is nothing's ending, but relationships have to change. Your relationship with everything that you've built so far, which was based on what your parents thought and what your peer group said, and you kind of turned around at somewhere around at some age, most people, you dimmed your light, you decided to play ball, kind of settled back into whatever it was that you thought everyone expected of you, and this was just ego survival mode. And at some point, you just turn around, you've done the research, there's a rediscovery, and it's like, oh, hang on, I'm going to break this all up.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in doing that, though, you are challenging every relationship you've built over a very long period of time. And so when that happens, if on the basis that people that have very close relationships with you see that, if they see that change happening, a deep part of them knows that fundamentally, if they want to stay in relation of some description, proximity, duration, maybe that has to change, then they've got to change too, and they'll dig their heels in. And they know the triggers, they know exactly where to dig you in the ribs to make you come back to small self. And it is only our capacity and increasing knowingness for this deep foundation of broad conscious experience and a remembering of who we truly are, that we will keep walking down that path, because it becomes fundamental to how you live and how you feel and what your purpose is, to keep going, because you now know by that stage that this is the real truth of who you were and how it was that you arrived. And so what we sort of say in this Vedic world is, we are seeking charm fearlessly. There is nothing about a liberated life that we will start to be fearful of, because it's like, if you start worrying what everyone's going to think, you dim your light.